Hello everyone. This is a better turnout than expected. So yeah, and also just a disclaimer: this is like my first non-technical talk of my entire career. So please be gentle. Yeah, I'll start. So today I'll be talking about learning the art of fostering open source communities. We are here at Tacoma, Washington. This is 11th July, and we are at SciPy. So I'll be mostly talking about the lessons I've learned fostering the Zarr community, which I've been doing for the last 4 years now. These are basically things and tips which I feel would be very helpful for the maintainers who are in this room. And I would like to know like how many maintainers are in this room. Like, okay, nice, awesome. Okay. Yeah, my name is Sanket Verma. I am a software engineer. This is the QR code for my website. If you want to learn more about me, please go here. I am deeply invested in the open source ecosystem. I steer various committees. I work on spec. I maintain projects. I sit on the technical as well as the administrative board of non-focus. So I think I have a pretty good idea about like what it makes to successfully manage an open source community. These are the slides for the talk. If you want to follow along, I'm gonna just like leave it for a few seconds here. If you all wanna take a photo and okay, nice. So I've divided this talk into like 4 parts. Like first we will define like what is the community, and then we're gonna deep dive into the main thing, which is how you foster it, like what are the best practices. Then we'll probably mention like some of the pitfalls which I have like encountered throughout the years, and we should probably avoid them, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. Yeah, so coming to the first part, like how do you identify the community of an open source project? Like this is basically like one of the first things that you should do when you are on the road, to manage your community. And like in my opinion, like anyone who interacts with a project in any way is considered a part of your community. These could be like users, these could be contributors who regularly contribute or who are like occasional contributors. These could be maintainers who actually are the people who are driving your project maintenance. Governance team, in this community mostly we see people who are maintainers. They govern the project, but there are some projects which contain like governance team which are different from maintainers. And then we have like other people like who actually funds a project, like CZI and other foundations. Then you have organizations and big companies and research academic institutes. So all of these, like if you imagine this is like a sphere, and all these people they form like a community of your project, and they should be taken care of, and they should be managed like very well in order to foster a healthy community. So the next question is like how do you identify like what's the maturity level? And this is like one of the important things which basically helps you decide what's the size of a community is. There's this open source maturity model which is on GitHub. Which is on the GitHub. If you want to look at it, it basically separates the community into like the project into like 3 levels: the basic level, intermediate, and advanced level. And there are like a bunch of like abbreviations here. So when I was reading this, I was like, nice, this is cool, because but I took it like, it took me like at least like 5-10 minutes to like get it. But I thought probably I should present this in layman terms, like what this actually means. So there's like a meme. There's gonna be like few memes in the talk, so yeah, please. I'm a young kid, so. So basically, this is what it means, like based on that model. So you have like 3 levels, like basic, intermediate, and advanced. So if your project is in like pre-alpha or alpha stage, you are in basic level, and your project should mostly have like basic documentation. It has licenses and code of conduct. You have a guide for setting up a technical environment, which basically is mostly in the contributing guide, and you have like test commits and bug reports. If you move to the intermediate level, that means basically you have already accomplished what is in the basic level, and you have these like other things which are here. These are mostly like availability of a roadmap. You have a design document which lays out how your project basically works on a technical level. And there you have relationship with stakeholders, and these stakeholders could be funders. These could be people who are from organizations who are involved in a project, who are contributing to it. You have much better quality assurance processes to catch like things when they broke down. And you have process and workflows for handling like substantial contributions. And this basically means like workflows like PEP and ZEP and NEP, if you know what I mean. And if you come to this, like this side of the slide, which is basically the mature level. So if you are at this level, that means your project has like a very large community. It has a big enough reputation. It gets contribution from all the organization who are in your user space. Like the organizations have basically integrated your project into their main product, and of course you have like some sort of like a streamlined funding source, which basically lets you have continuous source of money. So based on this, like this basically helps to define like what part of the stage you are at, and what's the size of your community. So if you're at a basic level, your community is like much smaller. You are in the growing stage. If you're in the intermediate level, you probably have like a bigger community. You interact with a lot of contributors, users, as well as people who are not contributing to your project, but they're very essential in your roadmap. And if you go to the mature level, you have like much bigger sphere. So it helps to define like what kind of audience you're dealing with and how you should manage them. Which basically brings us to the next point, like next part, which is like what are the best practices to manage the community. And I just want to like give a small disclaimer here that these are some of the things which I think are very essential for managing community. These may not be all of the things that you need to manage the community, and I'm happy to be told, Sanket, there are better ways to do that. So yeah. Yeah, so I'll first start with the community meetings. I think community meetings are like really good place to ensure that you have an open community. You invite everyone, despite of their engagement level, have a conversation with them, and try to gauge like what the activity of a project is beside the laptop screens. And I think like everyone knows, like I think like all of the projects here had some sort of like community meetings running around the calendar. But over the years, I've found like sometimes the meetings, they are like not much engaging and they're not much happening. And over the years, I've kind of like prepared some sort of like tips which helps you to manage these community meetings better. So the first thing is like you should ensure that you have a public calendar. This is a screenshot of the Zarr public calendar, which lays out all the meetings we have in a month. And yeah, if you don't have that, please ensure that it is visible and it's somewhere publicly visible on a documentation page or your main web page. Now we'll jump into like, how do you make the meetings more engaging? And this is a meme from Marvel, by the way. So yeah. So what I basically do when I have to run a meeting, I set a updates page, updates section, which kind of basically lays out all the things which are important and have happened since the last community meeting. These could be like very small things like a big PR getting merged, or me going to speak at PyCon Germany this year. And yeah, and these things are important because you don't want to just jump into the meeting with like, okay, we're going to discuss how we're going to develop this feature. You want to set a stage before how you start the meeting. And it's usually not also beneficial to like keep the agenda entirely clean. I try to set some like agenda items in the start, and also leave the room open for other folks to add their stuff. So this is basically a cue for all the attendees to kind of like add stuff if they want to discuss. And before I do that, there should be some sort of like a channel where you announce your community meetings. So for us, it's like mostly social media channels, and which includes Mastodon, Buffer, LinkedIn, and the other places. And sometimes you get folks who are new to your meeting. So it's fairly easy to conduct a meeting when you know who are already there in the meeting. But sometimes you encounter someone who is like new to the meetings, and they might feel awkward, like, what am I doing here, and should I speak or not? And like it could be like very overwhelming for them. So what I usually do is like I do some introductions with icebreakers, and so this is a very simple one. Like I've been asking folks like what their best strengths are, but we usually go like very in the uncharted territories where I ask them what are their best TV shows, what are their best movies, best song. over the years, I have compiled a playlist on my Spotify, which is the best songs recommended from the Zarr community. So yeah, it's like different ways how you can play with these things and make the meetings more welcoming and add that human element to it. Yeah. So I think we're done with the community meeting section. I want to jump to the next one, which is the office hours. I know that most of the maintainers here, they have some sort of like community meetings, but I want to know like how many folks do office hours. Not much, yeah. So this is something I also realized when I started taking care of the Zarr project. I was like, the community meetings are great, and it's like once in 2 weeks. There should be time. There should be some free open time to let me interact with the folks who are actually using Zarr, and which basically led me starting Zarr, which basically led me start the office hours. And I've been doing office hours for the last 3 years or so, and I think it's one of the hidden venues where you can understand and help your community. And I've sat in so just to let you know, like most of the time you would be empty sitting in a Zoom meeting and there would be no person over there, which is fine. But sometimes it's really good. I mean, I was able to identify use cases for my project via this office hours. So I didn't know the Norwegian government was using Zarr to store climate data. I didn't know the German climate computing system wanted to convert their NetCDF files to Zarr. And if I wasn't doing office hours, I wouldn't have known that. It's also very helpful to folks who are kind of like stuck somewhere. So it feels like more humanly to, sit with them and kind of like resolve their bug instead of going back and forth an issue for like a month long. And this has been really helpful. There was this person who kind of like ended up in the office hours, and we ended up debugging some stuff, and he is now one of the core maintainers of X-Ray. So it kind of like worked both ways, and it helps each other. So yeah, I think that's for office hours. Online spaces. So I think like projects here use one or other type of chat platforms. So this is a screenshot of the Zulip chat, which is hosted on the open source science instance, and here we have all the discussions. So this is one of the ways how you manage your community asynchronously, and it's you just ensure that there should be, there are few ways how you can manage these online spaces, but the most important thing is to make sure that the code of conduct is followed all the time. The discussions which are happening in this space are related to your project. There should not be something else. And yeah, just make sure there is no hate speech and all that stuff. And the other thing is which I have seen over the time, and which has happened, and probably which has happened with the projects here, is sometimes there is no activity in the space, and people are like, is this project dead? And do I need to go somewhere else? And over the years, I've realized it's very helpful to post some sort of updates over your chat platform, which could be Zulip or anyone, to let the community know okay, the project is alive, we are releasing this, and we are having this community meeting, or we are having an office hour, and some kind of stuff. So it kind of makes the online space active besides of the other spaces like GitHub and stuff. Okay. Yeah, so I think we probably would have run into this situation more than once. So we all love we love contributions, right? And conflicts. I don't think we like that. We want to avoid it, right? So how should we do that, right? So I've compiled some of the things which I think should which in my opinion have kind of resolve these conflicts. I think it's really important to ensure that there's a transparent decision-making process. If there's a conflict, and if the conflict is resolved, you want to let know everyone, especially the folks who are involved in the conflict, that there's a process, and this is basically outlined here. And we were following that process to resolve that conflict. There should be a code of conduct, and there should be a reporting mechanism. Most of the projects here are kind of under the NumFocus umbrella, so there's NumFocus code of conduct working group which handles these kind of stuff. But it's very important to like mention which code of conduct we are following and what's the reporting mechanism if something bad happens. There should be a governance. It should basically kind of lays out who are the folks who are responsible for taking the decision in the matter of conflict. And the last and most important is the documentation and precedence. So just for example, if something has happened which kind of you resolved it, right? And you came to a conclusion, you resolved it. There should be a document laying out like how did we solve that, what was the process, and how do we avoid it in the future. And putting these things public in somewhere in the GitHub repository ensure that there's like some sort of like resource for the upcoming contributors and maintainers how you should handle these conflicts. And I think the like contributions is like merely simple. Like you should have these like maintainers and contributors guide like fully updated to make sure the contributions are streamlined. Okay. Yeah, I would also like to focus on the contributions part. So like we do get like contributions in like technical and non-technical space, right? And these are like mostly in pull requests and issues and stuff. But what happens if your contribution is like very substantial? So I'm talking about like something which changes it. So for example, Zarr is a specification, and specification involves like a technical document which lays out how the arrays are stored and groups are characterized and what is metadata is. And this involves soliciting feedback from maintainers across like various stakeholder communities. So you should have some kind of process when you're dealing with change which is like very substantial. And for that, like we have created like Zarr enhancement proposal, and there are different versions and flavors of proposals out there, which is like Python enhancement proposal, NumPy enhancement proposal, and that stuff. So it's better to handle, in my opinion, substantial contributions via processes instead of simple GitHub issues and PR to solicit feedback and come to a conclusion. We have already used like our process like extensively to come like advance our version to like version 2 to version 3. And I have kind of like written a blog post which is kind of like a brain dump of why we needed the process for our project. So if you end up in a situation where you think you want to have some process for your project and not sure like where to go from there, this is the blog post you want to read. This lays out everything. This is basically my brain dump of like working for a few months to come up with the process. Okay, cool. Yeah, so there should be an animation here, but okay, no worries. So I'll come to the part like how do I grow my community? Like we are always looking for, ways how we can grow a community and add more contributors, add more funders, add more stakeholders to our project so that we can increase it. I have kind of like laid out into this like terms like you should be able to like build scaffolding. There should be low barrier for participation. If someone is coming to a project, they should not be intimidated by how they can participate and contribute to your project. This basically means like you have fully updated contributor and maintainers guide, and you need to be as inclusive as possible. Try to make space for people who are underrepresented in our community and encourage their contributions. These contributions should be celebrated every time, whether it is technical or non-technical. And you should probably go to a conference to speak about your project and attend sprints and hackathons and stuff, so you can get more contribution to your projects. You can also leverage educational programs like Google Summer of Code and Outreach, which kind of gives a pathway to the mostly student community to enter into an open source world and potentially become maintainers at some point. And you should also be able to identify potential donors and industrial adopters, which basically means reaching out to more people, trying to explore the space where you think your project is most heavily used, and talking to the industries and government organizations who are using your product. And you never know, these individuals or these industry owners will be potentially looking to donate to your project or contribute in some manner which will be helpful for a project. So when I was working on the pitfalls slide, a lot of stuff was coming to my mind. I was cool, I probably need to dumb it down to condense it down for the talk. So I've come up with like, small list here, but yeah, I'm happy to answer more questions here. So the first thing which I think we all should probably look is like we should always iterate and improve on our current existing processes. This includes like the entire ecosystem we have. So let's just say I've created a process for Zarr to enhance a specification. Over the years, we have realized like this is not the ideal process if you want to keep it learning for it all. And we have kind of like worked on a process to improve the current process. Your maintenance guide, your maintenance and contributing guide should be updated with the best practices. And yeah, you should always be open to add new stuff and change. The other thing is like define clear pathways for leadership. So what I mean by this is like you probably would have, like if you are a maintainer, you probably would have been a place where you were contributing to a project, right? And sometime you were like, cool, I want to be a maintainer. So if there is no pathway to elevate the person from contributor to a maintainer, the person would just go away. They're like, I've been contributing to this project for so long and I'm not a maintainer now. So yeah, you should define like clear pathways to elevate these people from like contributor role to a maintainer role. Clear off-roading process for inactive members. So like we have run into this like situation where we were trying to vote on something and we couldn't get enough vote because there were inactive maintainers who were left the project at some time. And we were like, we cannot pass this vote, right? So there should be a process how you could offboard these inactive members so to reach a better state. Yeah, I mean, I think I've already talked about this, but there should be a COC and reporting mechanism. And I think the last thing which I want to mention here is like timely responses on issues and PRs, which basically means that like if you're an early stage project, you probably could answer all the issues and PR and comment to them. But let's just say if you're a big project and you are unable to do that, it sends out like a message that this project is not active, or the user will think that I'm not being taken care of. For example, like we have like tried to use this bot which kind of automatically comments on the PR and issues made by the first time folks, like who have interacted with the project from the first time. And it basically says like, thank you for your contribution. Someone from the maintainer team will be reaching out to you soon so that they feel that they have been heard. Yeah, I think that's all I have. If you have any questions, yeah, let me know.
Thank you, Sanket, for this presentation. We have a few questions. And for those of you who are in the audience, just a reminder, if you have any questions, please put them in the Slack. And if you see a question that you like and want it to be asked, give a thumbs up emoji or another emoji with a positive vibe. Question from Gwen. How do you recommend treating PRs by community members who are no longer able to finish their contribution and may need to abandon it?
I think I would just like go to my default, like, reviewing the PR and like leaving proper review to it. And if that pattern repeats, I would probably try to establish some sort of communication before going with the actual review process. So so it's basically like, it's kind of like subjective. If it has happened more than few times, I would be hesitant and I would try to establish some sort of communication before going ahead and reviewing the PR.
I have a follow-up question, yes. But I might be breaking the protocol, so we'll just leave it for later. I run into it quite often.
I'm here in the conference, yeah.
Let's see. Another question from Julie. What does Zarr do to create psychological safety in its meetings?
Yeah, I think the first thing which comes to my mind is to make sure that everyone is heard, despite of their engagement level, despite of their activity. And I try to make the Zarr ecosystem as inclusive as possible. Like yeah, I mean, like, I think like our the diversity of the contributors, or basically the ecosystem of Zarr, is not that great. But I try to like encourage the participations. I try to make them feel heard, and I try to be there for them, like whenever they have any questions for me, which basically includes like office hours and doing all that stuff.
Thank you. Next question from Inessa. What are your thoughts on reviewing AI-generated PRs that don't bring value to the project?
So it kind of depends like what kind of PR we're talking about. So if it's a technical contribution, my inclination would be to kindly let the person know that we currently do not have set a policy for accepting these kind of contributions, and close the PR. And if you're talking about if you're talking about like documentation changes and these kind of stuff, I would ask them to basically I would ask them like, if do they understand what they have contributed so far. I mean, this is kind of like a gray space, because we were having this discussion back in Scientific Python Summit like a few months ago, and yeah, we ended up like talking about stuff which is every project should have policy and some sort of like a checkbox which kind of says, do you do you take responsibility for this contribution, and are you aware of what you're trying to submit here?
We have time for one more question, so I will ask a question from Max Grover, and then the rest of the questions, we have about 3 remaining. Please try to answer them in the Slack.
Yep.
So the question from Max: how do you balance having enough structure to maintain the community, but not too much to introduce overhead, time-consuming tasks that take away from maintaining projects?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think like this goes back to my pitfall point, is like always be ready to improve and iterate. And I can give an example. So when we first created the Zarr process, we didn't have any process how, like, we were taking contribution to the specification via PRs, which kind of made it like messy. And that's when we needed this process to evolve the specification. But in the last year, we have realized that this process has created an overhead for adding new proposals. So we have kind of like worked in a way to simplify the process, basically iterate on it and make the contributions like less overheady for the folks. And just trying to like listen to the community, what they are saying, and not just burden them with like a lot of like process and workflows. So always be ready to improve and iterate.